Hi, everybody. Hello. I'm Barbara Carrellas, and welcome to Tantra, Kink, and Consciousness. This is my first ever webinar. I know what took me so long. Well, I now have some amazing people helping me do this more easily, and I'm going to thank them in just a moment. Thank you for joining me today. I'm here to answer some questions and offer some insights about Tantra and BDSM. Now, both practices are in the news and the popular culture these days, wouldn't you say? Especially BDSM? So I'm going to use this hour to dispel some myths and to share some techniques that from both practices that will enhance your sexual experience and create a more profound connection between you and between you and your partner or partners. So, what can you expect to get out of the next 75 minutes? Well, if you've got a lack of excitement in your sex life right now, you can expect to get some inspiration. If you're curious about either Tantra or BDSM, you'll get some information to help you separate what's fantasy from the facts about both these conscious sexuality practices. And like I said, there's a lot of fantasy as well about both. Now, if you suspect that sex and spirit are connected, but you aren't quite sure how, or you haven't felt the connection as strongly as you hoped you would, then you'll walk away with some new possibilities to both find and strengthen that connection. Perhaps you're here because you want to add some new skills to your Tantra or your BDSM practice. I think you'll discover that by borrowing from both sexuality practices, you can expand and deepen what you already do and what you already love to do. So, if you're ready to take your sex life to the next level of consciousness, the next step in your personal erotic evolution, you are in the right place. Before we go any further, let me introduce the little web genius who brought us all together tonight, and that's Elise Bish, who's going to explain the technical aspects of tonight's webinar. Elise?
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm so excited to be here with Barbara. She has some really great content planned for us, so I'm really looking forward to that. And I just want to make sure that everyone gets to experience the best quality possible. This is a new platform for us, so bear with us if there are some technical issues. We'll be working with that as they arise. We're going to if you look on your right hand, you'll see the chat is enabled. I'd like to use that pretty much exclusively for tech issues for this call. So if there is anything that's going on for you, either video or audio wise, if there's something really crazy happening, go ahead and shoot us a chat and we'll look into getting that fixed right away. Also, if something goes down with the chat or if there's a big problem, I'll be checking my email at elise@urbantantra.org. So you can shoot me an email there. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the back end there if you're having any huge issues. One thing, if you are having streaming issues, that can help you. If you mouse over the video, there's options for bandwidth adjustment. It's the little icon that looks like the bars on your cell phone. So you can click on that and lower your bandwidth if you're having streaming issues. That'll help you get the best out of the video and audio quality. And yeah, we'll be here with any issues if they arise. And like I said, hopefully things will go smoothly. But yeah, if you need anything, just chat at me and we'll get at you. And I'll probably pop in and out as the webinar goes along if there are things we need to cover. So other than that, I think we're good. Barbara, you want to take it away?
Let's go. Thanks so much, Elise.
You're welcome.
And again, thank you. I know that there are people from all over the world tuning in right now, and I just love that. Urban Tantra has become quite a global community. I never had any idea how wide and deep a global community it would be, and it really makes my heart sing, just have to say. Okay, so before we do anything, let's start the way I start all my workshops, which is get comfortable, relax your jaw, and let's take 3 big, full breaths together. First one, And another. And last one, let out the day. And let in the new. As you're going to see, breath is one of the most important foundational pieces of a conscious sexuality practice. And it's a practice to which I'm quite thoroughly addicted, as you will also learn. So at any time when something, if anything, feels new or challenging or confronting, if anything does, just take a nice breath and just breathe your way into it and through it, okay? That's a good rule for life, not just tonight. So let's define our terms before we go any further. I'm really big on defining what we're talking about so that we're all on the same page for this experience. First of all, what's Tantra? Well, that one depends on who you ask. As those of us who practice Tantra have learned, there are nearly as many variations on opinions on what Tantra is as there are people who practice Tantra. I think what we all can agree on is that Tantra is a spiritual practice that recognizes that all aspects of human life, including sex, including but not limited to sex, all of them are a legitimate and effective path to enlightenment, to connection with the divine, to connection with something bigger than we are. Now, when we start throwing around words like enlightenment, divine, God, goddess, whatever, I know that can make some people really widgy. You do not have to believe in any particular deity, God, goddess, embodied, disembodied, religious figure, or any religion whatsoever to practice Tantra. It's a lot like yoga. You can pretty much put whatever spiritual spin on it you want to, or none at all. Because the truth is that when you begin to practice Tantra, you will experience a connection to something bigger than you are, whether that's your community, another person, or just to the great web of life that's pretty miraculous, whether or not you particularly believe in something that created it, right? So it helps us find that connection no matter what our spiritual or religious beliefs are. Now, tantric sex is just one of those aspects of life that Tantra says we can pursue consciously to reach that state of higher knowing, shall we, or higher understanding, we might call it. So tantric sex is simply a way or ways of exploring and experiencing sex that include and encourage a spiritual experience. All Eastern forms of sexuality, Tantra, Tao, which really started off as a branch of Chinese medicine, Taoist sexuality, they all see sex more like an energy we allow rather than an activity we do, that we engage in, which is the doing, and the activity is a much more of a Western concept. In Tantra, we use techniques like breath and touch and sound and movement in ways that open up our bodies to the sexual energy that starts most usually in the genitals, and then we can move it around the body, essentially making the entire body a sensual sexual organ. Pretty cool, huh? Who doesn't want that? Right. So that's how we're going to hold Tantra for this particular webinar. Now, how are we going to define BDSM? Well, first, the initials. The initials stand for bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, sadomasochism. Now, there are a whole lot of myths about BDSM, and they've existed in the culture for a very long time. In fact, when I posted the announcement for this webinar on a Tantra-based focused Facebook group, it produced a number of comments that were indicative of the general public's feelings about BDSM. It also produced quite a discussion, I might add. Uh, and some of the comments, which, like I said, are pretty indicative of the general public, was that Tantra and Kink are pretty opposing forces, sort of like, and I used to think this too, you know, pretty much as far apart on the spectrum as you can get. If it's a 500-mile road, Tantra and Kink are cities at the end of that road. In fact, I think you're going to find, even in this short meeting that we're having tonight, that it's really, as conscious sex practices, it really is more of a circle or a spiral. And that BDSM and Tantra can really exist on the same spectrum of enhanced sexuality practices. But more on that later. Another comment that was raised in that same forum was that Tantra was very equal and Kink often involves one dominating the other, and I'm quoting. In fact, any dominating and submitting that goes on in BDSM is highly consensual. We'll talk about more about that in a moment. And think about this. We call it power exchange, not power grabbing, not power over. We talk about power exchange in BDSM. And the truth is, in order to loan your personal power to someone for an hour, an evening, a week, a day, a lifetime, in the case of certain relationships, you actually have to have some. So people who choose to be submissive are not powerless morons. They're actually extremely powerful people who have made a choice to the benefit of their own health and happiness to consensually loan bits, pieces, or certain amounts of their personal power to someone else who takes responsibility for that power and treats it with great respect. Now that's very different from, what shall we say, a war situation in which someone is brutally domineering over some poor, helpless victim prisoner or, person that they have conquered, right? Very different dynamic. Okay, another comment from that forum. Tantra is the natural state. Kink is a perversion of the natural state. Well, it's easy to see where that one came from. Tantra, BDSM has been considered perverted by everyone, including the psychotherapeutic community, until very recently. It's only in very recent years that BDSM has been taken off the list of, in fact, perversions. And as we'll see, I think, along this call, and many of you obviously already know, it's not a perversion, it is a choice. And lastly, or the last one I'll share with you, is that Tantra and Kink are completely, all capitalized, completely different energies, vibrations. Tantra is elevating of spirit, Kink is the opposite. Again, in my experience, in the experience of everybody I know who engages in BDSM, quite the opposite is true, in that people who practice BDSM find it enormously elevating of spirit and freeing and a lot of other things. So, let me give you just a teeny smidge of my history on this, because I also thought that Tantra and BDSM were just like, whoa, no way, not in the same room, not in the same building, not in the same country. I mean, no. However, shortly after I started practicing Tantra, which was late 80s, by 1990, I had met a whole lot of amazing people who were practicing, you guessed it, conscious BDSM. I was fortunate enough to meet Fakir Musafar and Raylin Galina very early on in my spiritual sexual journey. Fakir Musafar, if you don't know who he is, you can Google him, F-A-K-I-R, Musafar, is, well, let's put it this way. Look in the mirror. Do you have any holes in your body other than these two right here? If you do, you probably have Fakir Musafar and his partner at the time, business partner, Jim Ward, to thank for it, because Jim Ward and Fakir Musafar are pretty much the grandfathers of the modern piercing movement, popularity, craze. But more than that, they also, especially Fakir, went back into history and into other cultures, and they have borrowed and adapted spiritual, even religious practices from Native Americans, Indian culture, rituals that involve body modification, extreme states of extremes, really. Things like the Native American sun dance, hanging from hooks, offering blood back to the earth, traveling to speak to, astrally traveling to speak to the Great Spirit, to Creator, or Indian kavadi dances, multiple piercings. And early on, I was exposed to and became friends with Fakir, and we would go through long evenings where he'd talk about how he reached certain trance states and could speak to the divine, and I would talk about how I did it through Tantra. But it really went home when I saw it physicalized. Raylene Galena, she died just last year, was a master piercer, a priestess, BDSM practitioner, piercer, and ritual leader. Amazingly powerful woman. She was doing a demonstration of what's called play piercing one night. Play piercing play piercing involves placing thin needles, like hypodermic needles, on the body for the purpose of raising endorphins. They are taken out after the ritual, the scene is over, and the holes close up. That's all there, as opposed to permanent piercings, where obviously you pierce with the intention of inserting jewelry. Okay, she was doing a demo. Now, I wasn't down with this play piercing thing. I was really fond of permanent piercings, as you can tell. But play piercing sounded, well, just icky to me. But I figured, hey, a demo? I get to learn something. I can sit in the back. Maybe I can figure this out and I won't have to participate. Cool. So I go, and this story is in my book, Urban Tantra. In brief, she pierced a circle of needles around the chest and breasts of one woman, and then did the same to another. Then with elastic thread, she wove a kind of dream catcher pattern. And when she finished both dream catcher patterns on both chests, she had them face each other, and she tied them together in the middle of the dream catcher with a piece of elastic thread, and then set them in motion with like a move of the shoulder. So now they're eye gazing. They start breathing together, and they're moving back and forth, and they're tied together with needle and thread at the chest. My body, mind, consciousness kind of exploded, or maybe it imploded, with the realization that I was watching a physicalized demonstration of what I practiced with eyes, breath, hands, and energy as the Tantric heart mudra. Well, needless to say, my Tantric practice and my beliefs about what Tantra was, and by the way, historically, Tantra is very welcoming of extreme states, but that's for another webinar. I was changed completely by this. It didn't mean I ran into the next play piercing party I could find. In fact, I didn't. But I gained an understanding that led me just a couple of years later to found Urban Tantra, because back in the 80s and 90s when I was first studying Tantra, Tantra as practiced in this country, which is the United States, was very heteronormative. It was very male-female, and it tended to be the province of white people, middle-class people, as I like to say, Marin County, California people. Let's just say it felt like it left out a lot of people that I knew. So I wanted Urban Tantra not to be a Tantra for all those other folks, but to be a Tantra that included everyone, including people who were of different colors, ages, weights, and genders, and sexual preferences. And by that, I don't just mean who you sleep with, but how you want to do it. I just wanted everyone to feel that they had a place at the urban Tantra table. This, of course, brought in more people with more genders and more different ways of having ecstatic sex. And I wound up learning more about all sorts of sexual practices, including conscious BDSM. So, back to BDSM, consciousness, and Tantra. Let's face it, all BDSM is not conscious BDSM, just like all sex is not conscious sex. All sex is not Tantra. People have a lovely time with sex and a lovely time with BDSM without a whole lot of consciousness involved, but with a whole lot of fun, and that's great. There is no such thing as a bad orgasm, I say. However, there is a magic and a depth and a loveliness to anything done with perfect consciousness. And by perfect, I don't mean perfectionism. I just mean the perfection of being in a conscious moment. So one of the similarities that all forms of conscious sexuality share is the ability to produce delicious trance states. Let me define that. People define trance differently. However, most people would agree that trance, including spiritual masters, would agree that trance has the following three elements. First, a sense of timelessness. When in this erotic trance, this ecstatic trance, you transcend time completely. I'm sure you've been there. Have you ever been making love or any other erotic activity that brought you bliss and didn't realize the amount of time that passed, whether, you may have thought 20 minutes had passed and it was really 2 hours? You know that feeling? Excuse me. And it doesn't just happen during sex, of course. You can get lost in art, or in my book, Ecstasy is Necessary, I have lists of ways that people told me that they could go into that kind of a trance state. But sex is just really good at getting you there effectively and quickly. Okay, timelessness. Secondly, you lose your ego self, that part of you that has a rigid boundary, that feels very in control, and you kind of melt with someone else or other people into some other reality other than your usual self. Some people feel like they're taking off an armor. Other people feel more expansive. People see it, feel it, hear it, experience it differently. But losing ego self. And the third is connection. You feel connection with somebody else, maybe to something bigger than yourself. I talked about this before. Maybe you feel closer to nature or humanity, or you feel your place in the entire web of life. Whatever, connection. So those are pretty delicious states. In fact, I think they're why I do what I do. For the privilege of being in, the pleasure of being in those states, and the privilege of bringing other people there with me. Interestingly enough, I read a tweet just yesterday or today that I thought expressed the cross-platformness, if you will, of this particular quality. My colleague and friend, Artemisia Divine in Australia, posted this tweet. And I'm going to leave a blank, and you fill in the word. You guess what it is, or fill in what it is for you. Open-hearted blank. Sounds cheesy, but to experience it, wow. Feels like the answer to the most important question I didn't even know I asked. So what was the blank? What was it for you? Was it sex? Was it Tantra? Was it BDSM? Something else? Okay, for all of those are going, well, is she going to tell us? For Artemisia, that day, it was open-hearted kink. But I know Artemisia, and another day it could have been Tantra, or it could have been sex. And thank you, Artemisia, for that lovely tweet. So, another similarity, between Tantra and conscious BDSM is intention. Intention, in this case, on more than just a genital orgasm. There's nothing wrong with having sex just to have a genital orgasm. Like I said, no such thing as a bad orgasm. Kind of like pizza that way. But In conscious sex, we tend to be less focused on genital orgasms because there's so much else as good to experience, especially if we delay orgasm. In other words, it just gives us a longer ride. Orgasm, in both BDSM and Tantra, we often delay orgasm so that we have more moments to be in the middle of, to suck the juice out of. And we know from experience that orgasm tends to bring the energy down. It's a lovely way to end the magic carpet ride, but we don't want to use it to end the magic carpet ride too soon. We want all the other orgasmic moments, ecstatic moments available on the journey. So those are some similarities between Tantra and BDSM. Now, I promised you 6 techniques for conscious sex. So let's take a big breath and we'll go to those. Come on now, all together. 6 techniques for conscious sex. The first technique, get consent. Now, I know this too is in the news a lot. Let's talk just a little bit about consent and why it can be really, really hot. Getting consent is not like, taking some evil tasting medicine that spoils everything, the taste of everything that comes after. No, 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 no. Getting consent is like the truffle oil that makes the entire meal exquisite. Okay? Why? Because consent is part of consciousness. Consent is part of excitement. Consent is part of anticipation. Let me give you some examples. First of all, one of the ways that I think you're getting this from other things I've said so far, one of the ways I get consent is I define my terms. For example, if you were to say to me, hey, would you like to have sex? I would say, well, what do you mean by sex? Do you want to have oral sex? Do you want to fuck? Do you want to do erotic massage? What kind of sex? What's sex to you? Believe me, sex is very different to different people. Believe me. If you don't, start making agreements with your partner about whether they can have sex with other people and what sex means. You'll find out real fast differences. So in that case, what's Tantra? I would ask the same questions. Well, what is Tantra to you? Does that include genital touch? Does it include penetration? Do you just mean breathing? Do you mean eye gazing? Are we going to do breath and energy orgasms? What do you mean? And obviously, the same is true for DS or SM. What do you mean? There's thousands of activities that come under the heading of DS or SM. I love some of them, and I don't ever want to do some others. So what are we talking about here? Then I really encourage you to go for an enthusiastic yes. My rule of thumb is no means no and maybe means no. And here's why I think maybe also means no. If I say, well, you ask me if I would like to have my toes sucked. And I go, well, maybe. Now, what might I mean by that? Well, it's cold in here and my feet are cold and I don't want to take off my shoes. So if it were warmer, I might be interested. Or maybe it's loud and I don't like the music and people are frantically moving about trying to get drinks. The atmosphere's not right. But if the atmosphere were better, I might want to have my toes sucked. See where I'm going with this? So maybe means that conditions are not right in the present moment, whatever those conditions might be. But if they changed, I might be interested. But since they haven't changed yet, it's a no. That's why maybe's a no. Now, an enthusiastic yes. Now, we would all like to see this and to feel this. Yeah, yeah, now, yeah. And there are other forms of enthusiastic yes. For example, wow, that sounds really, really, really exciting. Well, I'm a little scared. And I may not be able to do all of that tonight, but I really want to try. See, that's enthusiastic. And I'm also stating that I have a little reservations. And this leads us to the other part about consent, which is consent is an ongoing process. The way I can maintain that last enthusiastic yes I just told you about was because I know that I can change my consent, withdraw some consent, or all my consent at any given moment. I can say, oh, little too much, or simply, I thought I was going to love that, but it's not doing it for me tonight. Well, let's try again another time. Let's just fuck. We're changing consent. We're changing consent. Now, obviously, in the case of BDSM, consent is incredibly important because in BDSM, we play with dangerous toys some of the time, or we play with edgy emotions. And there have to be ways we have to make agreements up front, and then we have to be able to express ourselves as the scene goes along. For instance, yes is pretty much yes, right? But we often have what we call safe words. Many of you, again, are familiar with this, which are words that we would not typically use in the scene. For instance, we might want to yell, stop, stop, no, you're hurting me, stop, because that's really fun, and that's the scene we're playing. We're pretending like kids. So stop is not a safe word, really, not a very smart one anyway. So we often use a traffic light system. So yellow is, maybe reaching my edge, we need to slow it down a little or at least not go any greater. And red means all play stops. It may stop for the night, or it may stop just till we figure out what was wrong and start up again, but it stops for now. So that's a form of ongoing consent as well. And we can do that in any form of conscious sex, including Tantra. As a matter of fact, I've really appreciated that people from the BDSM community coming into Tantra communities have brought with them that lovely piece of consent. Because sometimes, I certainly remember being in tantric circles years ago, where people would get so caught up in their bliss and their ecstatic expression of that bliss, and occasionally violate my boundaries because I wasn't quite there yet. So I think this new way that we're all learning to find, express, and negotiate consent in all our different erotic communities is a wonderful thing. Okay, second technique for conscious sex. Well, I call it get conscious. Now, by consciousness, I do not mean the touch of a guru's finger to your third eye, and yes, my dear, you are now conscious. You have achieved consciousness. No. Consciousness to me is real simple. It means putting my attention on my intention. If my intention is to give you a body-melting, sensual massage, I am completely focused on your body, how it's responding to my touch, how you're breathing, how we're breathing together to stay in that groove. It just means going totally into what you're doing. Anything done with that kind of consciousness, with that kind of attention on your intention, is magnetic. It's magic, whether it's energy massage with a feather, or whether it's a flogging with a whip. It's magnetic if it's that conscious, because we're applying what is commonly called, and correctly called, the principle of mindfulness. So any of you who have already done any mindfulness training, any reading about mindfulness, any basic simple mindfulness practices are already a step up here, because you already know what this is about and you're just going to apply it to eroticism. For those of you who want to apply it to eroticism but haven't done a whole lot of mindfulness training, Easy. There are probably 50,000 websites where you can get some mindfulness training for free. Do it after the webinar. And then there's nothing like practicing something erotically for it to imprint and then affect the rest of your life positively. If you can learn to be mindful in sex, believe me, you will be able to apply mindfulness to the rest of your life. And I think this whole notion of putting your attention on your intention and consciousness will start to beneficially influence your entire life. One last thing about consciousness. I learned early on from my first Tantra teacher a phrase that I think will help a lot, and it was 3 strokes for 30, meaning something that you would normally do with 30 strokes, be it touching, thrusting, kissing, slow it down to 3. If you could eat 30 strawberries, slow it down. What if you took that same amount of time to eat just 3 of them? That's actually a good example. Eat a strawberry or some other fruit or some other food you like, and at the 3 strokes for 30 rule, and see how much more you get out of what you're doing, what you're tasting, what you're feeling with your tongue and your lips, than when you just gobble it down. So yes, mindful eating is also erotic. Okay, so this is really a follow on this one. Our third technique for conscious sex is to play at the resilient edge of resistance. Now, those of you who have read my book, Urban Tantra, are really familiar with this concept because it, like breath, is one of my favorites. The resilient edge of resistance is a term coined by my beloved late teaching partner, Chester Maynard. And what it means, well, do it to yourself. Hold your arm and push into your arm way, way, way deep. I mean, like those massages that are too hard and hurt. No. You can feel the body just kind of running away from it, right? Like, no, stop. Or tensing up against it, defending itself. No. Now, go the opposite and do that sort of, I call it the creepy light touch. I am kind of afraid to touch you, and I'm just kind of not very present in my touch. Do the, ew. That was too light. So first one too heavy, second one too light. Now take your arm and hold it firmly, but not too firmly. Just hold it. And your intention is to touch with enough pressure that your body pushes back just a little. Just kind of pushes back enough to meet the touch of your other hand. And notice that the arm that's being held feels kind of held and supported. Supported enough that it can relax. And you can actually go a little deeper and it still feels wonderful. Sort of like yoga, for those of you who do yoga or any kind of exercise really, or stretching, you lean over and you can only bend over a certain way and you're all disappointed with that. But then you take a breath and you drop a little further. And then you take another breath and you can go a little further. That's finding the new resilient edge of resistance. We play and relate most ideally at that resilient edge. Now, when we're having sex, we can touch at that edge. We can kiss at that edge. That push that just says, and you meet it, and then it can go a little further and a little further. And that's also how a tantric scene can progress. From something that starts off very, very lightly, gently, and gets very active and very hot and very, or in a BDSM scene, it's how we take somebody deeper. You don't start, let's go back to our whip or our flogger. And for those of you who don't know, a flogger is one of those whips that has many, many tails. Some of them can be very soft, Some can be kind of thuddy and others can be kind of stingy. We don't pick up a flogger and let's say there's a range of 1 is very mild and 10 is very wild. We don't start at 8 or 9. No, that's called violence. We don't do that. This is a sensual experience. We start with a hug, with a kiss, with just running the soft leather flogger all over their back, letting them feel the nice feel of the leather. We're starting at 1 or 2, then maybe 3, and then a little light flicking, 4, and we're breathing, and after a while, they're sticking their butt out, they're moving towards you, their body is saying, more please, more, I'd like it a little harder please, because you haven't actually kept up with their resilient edge of resistance. They're going faster than you are, you with the flogger that is. And before you know it, however long it takes, because there's no clock on these things, you're up at that 9 or 10 and everybody's having an absolutely magnificent time. So that's the resilient edge of resistance in both Tantra, sex, any conscious sex, and BDSM. And now, in my view, the most important, breathe. We are just not encouraged to breathe fully. As I fond of saying in many of my workshops, it's like, if just imagine you walk onto a crowded elevator in a major metropolitan city, 9 a.m. Monday morning, the elevator doors close, and you do this. Right? What's going to happen? Everybody's pushing buttons. Let me out, breath terrorist, let me out of this elevator. Because it's just not cool to breathe like that. Unfortunately, I breathe like that quite often, and I've seen this very thing happen in elevators. But hey, it's worth it. I now find it amusing. At first, I didn't know why everybody was leaving the elevator. Anyway, now, sexually speaking, I think one of the reasons, and this is just my theory, no one did a clinical study on it. I think that one of the reasons sexually we don't breathe much when we're approaching orgasm, when it gets, you know how that is? Like you're getting near an orgasm and you're like, kind of like you're looking for it. Well, I think that's because when we were like adolescents and starting to masturbate to orgasm, I think we all learned the quiet and quick rule. Quiet. We had to be quiet so that nobody would discover us in wherever we were before we got our orgasm, so that we could get our orgasm. And we had to be quick for basically the same reason. So to be quiet, what's the easiest way to be quiet? You hold your breath. So I think rather like learning to type on a particular keyboard or ride a 2-wheel bike instead of a 1-wheel, a unicycle, we all learn to masturbate holding our breath. So now we tend to do the same thing when we're sexually aroused. We hold our breath. Hell, we hold our breath when we get a tattoo, which makes it hurt more. And if you hold your breath during a BDSM scene, it will make it hurt more, and not necessarily in the best way. Although maybe, I'm not you. But I can guarantee you that when you breathe more, you feel more in a good way. Think of it this way. Imagine that when you're not breathing, when you're holding your breath, when there's an incredibly limited amount of air coming into you, that you are filling up an area in your body right around your genitals about the size of a coffee cup or a small glass. Now, when you breathe, remember in tantric sex, we are moving the energy around our entire body. That's our intention. That you're filling, let's say, a 30-gallon container. And when you take off on your magic carpet to go into your trance state, I just ask you, how much fuel would you like to have in your container? Frankly, me, I'd rather have the 30 gallons. So breathing will fill your gas tank, to put it very simply. So now, how do you breathe? Well, it doesn't really matter how you breathe. However, I have learned over the years some ways to breathe that does breathe energy more efficiently, build energy more efficiently. And one of those ways, we can do it right now for just a minute. Relax your jaw, open up the back of your throat, and put your focus on the inhale. Just let the exhale fall out. And let's breathe in and out through our mouth, because simply we can take in more energy, more breath that way, more air that way. So, come on now, do it with me. We're just going to be doing this for a minute. Come on. Recommit to the breath. Make your breath a little fuller or a little deeper or a little wider. Keep going. Send it down into your genitals. Move it around to the back of your neck. Send it down your spine. Keep going, keep going. We're only going to do this for a little bit longer. And now, just for a few moments, let's really commit to it. Let's breathe fuller and faster. Let's really go for it. And then we'll end with 3 big full breaths, okay? Big deep breath, let it out. Second deep breath. Third deep breath. Just notice how you're feeling. Feeling a little bit different? That was a very short breath session, very short. But are you feeling a little calmer or more energized? Little lightheaded, maybe a little almost dizzy, little bit, teeny bit altered? That was the oxygen, the breath, starting to bring you to an altered state of consciousness. Even if you just got your toe in the door, that's what was beginning to happen. And if you breathed a bit longer, you would have gone further. I know I'm stoned, but then again, I'm a really cheap breath date, and I know some of you on this call are too. So let's just take another breath, clear our heads, but not too much. We don't want to go back to that other unaltered state, just to get present. Now, in a tantric practice, you might have gotten a taste of how high the breath, along with all the other techniques we do to move sexual energy around our bodies, you might have gotten just a sliver of the experience of what could happen with prolonged focus on the breath in combination with other tantric techniques. Now, in BDSM, when you can breathe like that as a receiver, and I'm going to talk about sensation play, giving and receiving sensation for the purpose of this example, you're filling your entire body with that sensation. You're becoming a container for that energy. And if you breathe with someone, you can kind of feel how they feel. You can't read minds, don't go there. But you can, if you match your breath to someone's, you can kind of feel they feel. And in a DS scene, if you order your submissive to breathe the way you're breathing, you can calm down an anxious submissive, or you can energize one. So there's lots of different ways that you can use your breath to change states, happily, joyfully, and consensually with yourself or with a partner. I know that that when I have been incredibly stressed and enter a tantric exchange, kind of like this week's been hard, and I'm with somebody who's been comes from a way calmer place, I will just follow their breath. I just want to go where they are, and the fastest way to do it is I'll just breathe with them and kind of ride their carpet on out. So the where breath can take you is absolutely endless, and you know what? That brings us to the commercial. I want to tell you, I'm going to be honest and call it what it is, but I want to tell you some of the ways that you can join me this spring to do more of this. I won't take long. We're basically calling these offerings dip your toe in, jump in, or dive deep. So there's 3 levels that you can come play with us on. The first one, the dip your toes in, that's at the New York Open Center on Saturday, April 4th. It's a 1-day workshop, and you'll learn lots of basic tantric techniques. First, you'll practice with yourself, see how it works in your body, and then with a partner of your choice. You'll learn how to have an orgasm just by breathing and using the other tantric techniques. I call them breath and energy gasms. They're pretty amazing. If those are possible, you'd be amazed how it opens up the world for what else is possible in your life. You'll learn the energetic building blocks of conscious sex, and we're even going to throw in a little sex magic just because it's fun. Now that's the dip your toes in. Now if you're ready to jump in and go a bit further, I created a brand new series of workshops just for you folks, and I call it the Urban Tantra Experience. We're kicking off the Urban Tantra Experience in London from the 12th to 14th of June. It's a weekend with a Friday night. On that weekend, you're going to have the time to go deeper. We're going to go further into breath. We're calling it the more you breathe, the more you feel. And of course, we'll go deeper into breath and energy gasms, because it's really hard to do a workshop with me and not enjoy a breath and energy gasm. We're also going to explore what Tantra, not only what Tantra is, but what it can be, because the core of my teachings, my work, and my philosophy is I want you to create your own practice. I want to give you the tools and say, now figure out how it works in your body, how it works for you, how it fits your lifestyle, your partners, what you want to get out of it. I don't ever want you to do something just because I do it, but rather to take something I've learned and to adapt it, warp it, paint it green. I don't care, as long as it works and gives you bliss. We'll also, on that weekend, the Urban Tantra Experience, we'll look at what orgasm is and what it could be. And believe me, there is always another place to take orgasm. One of the best parts about this work. We'll talk about making erotic agreements, and a little bit we touched on that today with consent. But why making erotic agreements can be so hot, and what giving and receiving really are, and how we can go more deeply into the experience of each, and how much that will change how we relate with our partners. We'll also touch upon making safer sex sexy, because if you're going to jump in or you're going to dive deeper, you're going to need to know that. Then I'll demonstrate the erotic awakening massages that I've been teaching for over 20 years. And at night, you'll get a chance to, on your own, go home and practice these juicy combinations of conscious breath, sensual touch, and kind of like a genital reflexology, really specific, delicious genital touch. Yummy stuff. Great fun. And then we'll end with what a friend of mine's calling my 50 Shades of Tantra, how conscious power exchange can expand and deepen your tantric practice. Okay, that was Urban Tantra Experience. Now, the diving deep, I have to admit, this is like just about the favorite thing I teach. It's 6 days long. The next one is in Copenhagen from the 5th through the 10th of May. And it's my Urban Tantra Professional Training Program. It's a 6-day program of self-love and self-discovery for people who work with sex or may want to work with sex or simply want to approach sex with the level of attention that a professional would give it. My intention in this workshop is to support you in finding your own unique erotic gift or healing gift or artistic gift, because it all comes out in this workshop, and helping you develop your distinctive talents. We're all different. We all have an individual, unique gift to give. None of us are in competition with each other, and we really stress that in this program. This, and as well, I want to support you in following and nurturing your passion. Not your shoulds, not your coulds, but your passion, your musts. Now, everything you learn in the professional training program can be applied to sex work, sex therapy, any body-based work, dance, yoga, massage. We've graduated now people from 25 countries. So when you graduate, you become part of this enormously strong global community of like-minded people who are really, truly out there changing the face of sexuality for the better all over the planet. And many of them are listening in on this call tonight. I can feel the love, and I love you all deeply. So for those of you who really want to have a deep experience, I really invite you into our community to do just that in Copenhagen in May. So now all you have to do to get more information on any of these spring offerings is to click on the shopping cart on the left of your screen. You'll see a little shopping cart. You're not going to have to buy anything. It's just where this webinar service has us put these kind of announcements. We can't flash them on the screen. So click on the shopping cart and you'll see the link to that offer. We'll also send it out to you in an email tomorrow morning with instructions about how you can replay this or invite your friends to see it for the first time. Okay, so 2 more techniques I promised you. We've only done 4. Here come the next 2. And for the fifth, instead of talking about it, let's just do it. Please close your eyes and take a breath. I want you to imagine that in addition to the 2 lungs in your chest, you also have a 3rd lung, and that lung is located in the little finger of your dominant hand. You know, the hand you write with, eat with. If you're ambidextrous, pick one. The little finger, imagine that that's a lung. And with your next breath, send the air into that new lung. Breathe in and out of that new lung in your pinky. Now imagine that you could breathe a color into your pinky, any color that you like, any color at all. And as you breathe into that pinky, that color starts out kind of pale, but gets richer, brighter, deeper. Maybe it glows. It gets way more intense with every breath of color into your pinky. Good. Now imagine that an entire galaxy of stars can be contained inside the pinky on your dominant hand. An entire galaxy. You can pretend that that sky, that color that you were breathing rather, is the sky behind the galaxy. Now this time with each breath, all those stars twinkle even brighter and brighter with each breath. That's it. Keep breathing. Maybe the sky gets brighter too, or deeper. And the stars get brighter and they twinkle. Well done. Okay, the next breath. With the next breath into your little finger, you're going to imagine that this galaxy has a sound. Could be a celestial sound. It could be like a droning sound. It could be a humming sound. It could be any kind of sound. Put a sound into that little finger. Excellent. Now a rhythm. The whole galaxy, that whole little universe in your pinky, pulses to its very own unique particular rhythm. So let that rhythm happen in that little finger. Excellent. Well done. All right, let's take another big breath into your little finger. And then let your attention come to neutral, to witnessing, not on any one body part, but just sort of neutral. And just notice, does your finger that you've been breathing into, your little pinky, does it feel any different than it did before you started? Does it feel any different than the finger, the pinky, on your other hand? Just notice. Is there a particular quality to the new feeling, if there is a new feeling? And let's take another breath. And on the exhale, you can open your eyes. That was a pretty quick exercise, but hopefully you felt a little something, even as quickly as we did that. So what happened there? If you felt something, and I'll presume you did, or that you will the next time you try it, what happened was that you used your imagination to send energy, which isn't a woo-woo concept, it's like physics, to send attention, energy, to your pinky. In other words, you put your attention on your intention using your, here's the fifth one, imagination. Now, what I want you to consider is, in that exercise, which way did your imagination work best? Were you most able to see the color? Were you most able to see the stars twinkle? Or did you feel them twinkling? Were you most able, or was it easiest to hear a sound? Or was it easiest to feel a rhythm, a pulse? Which way was easiest for you? This will probably tell you the most effective way you can use your imagination to move erotic energy through your body. In Tantra, and certainly in BDSM as well, we use our imagination to support our attention on our intention. That makes sense? We use our imagination to move energy. Because in fact, energy does follow thought. It's not just some new age made up concept. It's absolutely true. So there's lots of different ways we can move energy through our body. We can imagine it coming up our spine and down our front. If we're engaged in a BDSM scene, and this one has really helped people who are tops, who are the givers in BDSM, to send energy out of, again, we'll do a flogger, out of their flogger with the intention of it landing to the benefit of the person on the bottom. Top and bottom, typical terms, that's all. So, for instance, let me tell you how I've combined the tantric aspect with the BDSM aspect. One of the things I like to do when I'm having a lot of grief or anger an emotion that I need to free myself of. I will ask somebody who is practiced at this sort of tantric BDSM, conscious BDSM, to please flog my heart chakra, my back, right where the back of where my heart would be, with the intention of releasing the negative emotion and sending it out my front. So every stroke comes with that intention. And what I do is give back that energy as gratitude behind me. So we have an energy loop going on. I'm throwing gratitude back to the person who's sending energy to knock the emotion that I'm trying to shift out of me. Tantric heart chakra meditation with floggers. It's really beautiful, especially if you are then in a situation where you can throw yourself out under the stars afterwards, I might add. Okay. Number 6, the 6th conscious technique for conscious sex. Movement. Bodies are meant to be in motion. Bodies stay alive because they're in motion. Bodies that can't be in any kind of motion, as I'm sure some of you have seen, whether live or pictures, wither, shrivel up, harden, and eventually die. I tell a story in Urban Tantra about a dance teacher of mine whom I studied with when I was really young and I first came to New York. He had been an MGM chorus dancer, you know, in like the late 40s, early 50s. And he was in an incredibly serious car crash, near fatal car crash. And he arrived at the hospital completely paralyzed. At some point in the process, he regained consciousness, but was trapped in this completely paralyzed body. And being a dancer, he realized that the only way he was going to come out of this was that if he could find something he could move and keep moving it. I suspect that early day, perhaps the only thing he could probably move was perhaps his lungs. I think, as I recall, he could still breathe. I mean, he wasn't on a ventilator is what I mean. And each day or each week, he found something new he could move until he eventually was able to even dance again, and certainly teach, believe me. So again, the story is in more detail in Urban Tantra, but it was such a lesson to me in the power of movement, and what I really loved about it was moving even when you can't move. Because it's easy to imagine, yes, move your hips more, yes, get more into that thrusting, squeeze your pubococcygeus, PC muscle, the muscle that stops the flow of urine, the sexual health energy moving muscle, and that muscle does indeed move a humongous amount of erotic energy. And in my workshops, we work with that muscle a lot. However, from a BDSM perspective, and this was kind of fun, even when people are in incredibly restrictive bondage, and a whole lot of people like bondage, whether a little light bondage or a lot of bondage, the neat thing about bondage is that you keep moving within just in a smaller context. Or in the case of rope bondage, you might be actually when you're really hot and high erotically, it's fun to pull against the ropes because it increases the energy, because that much movement amps up the energy so much higher. There's a saying that people have who like to be tied up during sex. The ropes always start off too tight and they always wind up too loose, and it isn't the ropes that changed. So movement is huge, whether for kink or for tantra or for any other kind of sex, conscious sex. And wildly important for finding that magic carpet ride that we all like to ride on so much. So that's basically it for tonight, our first webinar. I am so incredibly grateful to the many of you who signed up to be on this call tonight. So grateful, especially to my colleagues from the professional training program who showed up in such numbers. And you've heard all this. I love you guys and girls and whatever else you're being tonight. Thank you for joining me. If you tuned in late, or if you're just now thinking about a friend that, oh, I wish they'd been there. They'd have loved this. Tomorrow morning, you'll receive an email from us with a link to the recording of this webinar. That link is going to be good for 10 days. So click like a bunny, forward the email to your friend, and let them know that it'll be live for 10 days. So if you would like to go a little further than we can do in an hour and 10 minutes, if you'd like to dip your toes in or jump in or even dive deep with me in a workshop this spring, just go to that shopping cart to find the link, or to barbaracarrellas.com. Right on the landing page of my website, you'll see a link specifically for all of you lovelies who have joined me on this teleseminar. And a big, great, gooey gobs of gratitude to our goddess mistress Elise for her webinar, Wizardry. Anything else that we need to say, Elise, before we go?
Nope, I think we're good. That was wonderful, Barbara. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and thank you, Elise. So, people, thank you for joining me. We plan to do more of these. In that email will be a link to a questionnaire, a little survey, if you don't mind. If there's anything else you want to hear from me, from the team, anything else we can offer you, or any questions we can answer, tell us on that form. So it's been a joy, it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing all of you again really, really soon. Bye.